Rick and Morty comic issue 46. The story starts out with Rick insulting Morty at length for almost getting him killed earlier. And somehow Morty's still happy and doesn't care, and says that the Queen started it and he's a man of great passion. Rick lands a spaceship somewhere because he needs a 24-hour break from him, right now. Which is why he doesn't just leave him at home and portal somewhere. So Rick once again didn't think to have his portal gun with him, and that's the whole reason Morty's with him. Rick takes him to a place called Rick World, where Ricks go to really cut loose and reboot. It's by the same Rick that made the Jerry daycare. There's a bunch of women here that flirt with Rick because everyone here is a robot assigned to play out some illusionary world or fulfill an impulse. Morty's really happy to see a world where everyone would just do whatever he wants. And Rick says he can do whatever he wants to them. There's a bunch of Jerrys here. And one of them asks how punchable his face looks today. You'd think they wouldn't be programmed to act cheerful, because it would be less sadistic. But I guess Rick's disgusted at Jerry's cowardice, so he wouldn't want him scared of him. Plus, if they're programmed to act scared, well, they could also be programmed to not run away though. Rick kicks him a lot, and there's a sign saying that it's been 23 days since the last robot malfunction murder rebellion. Rick's checking in on Rick and Morty for an overnight, and the woman asks if that'll be for one room or two, and Rick hates that she even has to ask. Rick's shown that they're currently running a special on the world tour package of his old rock band, and he has a platinum membership with a discount. Morty asks why all of the ladies here are redheads. Was Diane a redhead? Because this isn't a place for Morty. And unless Rick is actually a blonde who dyed his hair, Diane would have to be the blonde to make Beth blonde. Rick's told that he needs to mark as Morty because it's a new park policy and they've had a series of mix-ups. I don't know why this wasn't always a park policy. Rather than having a wristband system, they've been having their patrons physically mark their Mortys with a permanent marker. But he's not always going to be marked for the rest of the comic, so it's not really a permanent marker if it can be removed, just slightly less temporary marker. Rick's told that he might not want to draw the obvious thing, because tons of other Ricks did that. So he draws an L, and Rick says he's going to get some ladies and blow up some stuff while Morty stays in Mortyland out of his way, where there's a ton of Mortys at a kiddie playground. Morty thinks it's lame because it's for kids, even though it's got a slide at least. Rick then reminds us why he thinks Morty deserves this. Morty put his hands all over the Queen when it was explicitly stated to be a surefire death sentence for him and Rick. Morty tells Morty that of course it's not so bad here. There's some decent sandwiches and tablet games. Then Morty sees some other Mortys making a plan, and they claim that they're the bad Morty gang who all got left behind by Ricks who forgot them, even though obviously the Ricks would be told to just go back and find Morty by the Beths and Jerrys. So they wouldn't be able to get away with leaving them behind. Good thing there's a proper explanation for this. They all run to Rick's room and stab pillows under the sheets that are meant to trick them, and Rick punches one of them, having anticipated that they would show up. One of them gets him with a knife, and somehow he smiles and says he got him good. Then he starts shooting with his ray gun. We barely got to see Rick punch them at all, so that was kind of pointless. And Morty's walking around the hallway just outside the place, which is completely forced. Wouldn't it be forced to stay in Mortyland? Even if not, because that wasn't how the Jerry daycare worked, why would he walk around here? He almost got hit by those lasers. Why were these revenge planning Mortys in the Morty daycare with Morty, considering that all of them were robots? After Morty's upset with Rick, he's told that Rick ordered a game where he kills a bunch of robot Mortys. He says he does this every 3 months so he can stand being around him. Good thing the story established that Morty really screwed up at the start, so we can understand Rick better. Because normally this would seem weird because it stands in contrast to the bond they've usually shown to have together. And even then, Morty only screwed up because he was too stupid. But at least they kinda made it in character for Morty because we know how desperate he is and how badly he falls to temptation with women. But still, surefire death sentence. Rick fortunately admits that it's messed up, and Morty says that after all the dark stuff Rick's done, him not killing real Mortys feels like a Morty win. That would be Stockholm Syndrome, But Rick is actually nice to him at times, so he's not literally just interpreting as not being as evil as possible as kindness. He ends the story by putting his arm around Morty and smiling, calling him Little Scamp, even though Morty's asking for a game where Morty can kill some Ricks. So him being nice to him reaffirms that they do have a bond together. He does like him, he just annoys him sometimes. This issue is about Rick going to Rick World to blow off some steam by killing Morty bots after Morty nearly got him killed. And them being robots explains why he anticipated they would show up. And it does make sense that they're programmed to try to fight Rick, because they feel guilty about fighting them if they were scared and not trying to attack him. And Rick likes a challenge, even to the point where he's okay with getting attacked sometimes. And as Morty points out, it's way better than killing real Mortys, which we were initially led to believe. Which made it seem not so bad after we found out they were robots. That's better writing than it could have had for a story where Rick has a stunning moment where he wants to kill Mortys for stress, despite the fact that he cares about his own Morty and is nicer to him than he has to be. It's because they're just robots, and he'd rather lash out at them than his own Morty. He's really just doing this to protect Morty. This story was pretty memorable, but it doesn't make sense that the Morty bots were in Mortyland and able to interact with Morty. But it didn't matter because Morty didn't come with them for revenge on a Rick. But what if he did? There's no way Morty would have wandered out in the hall and spotted Rick doing that. He would have just stayed in Mortyland with a tablet. He was lucky Rick didn't kill him. He was already so used to fighting Mortys at that point that it took him a second to remember that him having the L on his forehead meant he was his Morty. But it was sweet of Rick to have things to keep the Mortys there entertained. Because it could have just had them in a room that had nothing to do in it and locked the door. But yeah, Rick was pretty unlikable here, I'll admit that. In the second story that's not in book 6 or 7, called Big Pimping, some pimps in shirts fly towards a metal door being told to enter an alien language. The guy with wings says their message said they had a new substance for sale, which is a prototype that their scientists concluded that when harvested from the one they requested would produce an addictive euphoria. Of all the stories in the comic to reference again, why this one? I don't like the one the pimp says that it'll also make the winged guy and then says a bunch of gibberish, and he somehow thinks that's what humans say. Rick shows up and says happily that the winged guy's grunt said he had good shit for him, and then we see a star in his eye for some reason, and there's a sound effect and he falls over, as just now the pimps speak English just to insult him. Turns out I was expected to know they hit him with a shovel. That was badly drawn. Oh, so it was worth referencing that pimp arc, because Rick's getting exactly what he deserves. One of them says, "Yeah, how do you like it?" And the other says, "Shovels to the head feel great. Right, Rick Sanchez?" Miraculously, Rick's awake in a chair right after that with no sign of an injury. And they decided that was enough for them and stopped. This is how you do slapstick wrong. He's supposed to be hurt, or at least dazed. He's asked where Morty is, since they're mad at him too. Rick tells them right away that Morty wanted a rematch on the Roy game, trying to be cool this time. And he keeps telling him that rock stars never live past age 27 unless they suck. That's not always true. Why would he tell them where he is? No problem. I guess for his own self-preservation, but I still don't like him getting Morty in danger so casually. Sure, he can just go to the Citadel of Ricks to get a new Morty. Sure, he can just clone another Morty and age him up, and even give him some memories to give him experience whenever he wants. But if he didn't feel attached to Morty, he wouldn't sacrifice himself for him in the show, or do stuff like go to Blips and Chits with him. But of course, if he cared about his grandson as much as he should, he'd go on the dangerous adventures with a clone of Morty, and only take the actual Morty to Blips and Chits and stuff. Now I wish I could see a Rick like that, because that makes more sense actually. Anyways, Rick asks the winged guy what his angle in this is. He tells Rick that the pimps have offered the most lucrative drug this sector ever saw in exchange for Rick, and he asks if he finds the thing he harvested pimp juice with familiar, and these pimps have dedicated their lives to making sure he feels every inch of their pain. I wish the cops that want to go after Rick in the pimp juice arc were talking pimps like these, because at least it makes sense that the pimps themselves want to get revenge on him. It's confusing. The pimps weren't able to talk in that arc. Apparently, Rick went after some wild, dumb pimps that can't talk. It turns out that the pimps that Summer returned to their own planet rebuilt their civilization, and the pimps studied the devices and genetic material that Rick left behind. Even though I thought they were just dumb animals that couldn't talk, because they never did, and they had to be dumb enough to get close to Morty to get hit with a shovel on the ground in the first place. Oh, finally it's addressed that they didn't talk. Why didn't Rick question it earlier? The guy says, "We didn't even talk. We communicated with a sophisticated system of exquisite aromas." Do you know how painful this is? We had to manipulate our esophageal chambers and learned all the languages of the universe. All of them? That's ridiculous. They'd only learn a few they need. Somehow they find it undignified. I guess because they're so proud of the interesting way that they communicate. Their every resource went to recreating Rick's experiments, and they refined a way to use his rare human gases to create a substance so stimulating that every dealer of narcotics in the universe will demand them. That's impossible and stupid. Rick is shocked that the pimps think his gases are rare. Pimp says, obviously, why else would you go to such efforts to harvest ours and conceal your own? It's interesting and refreshing to see a character be wrong when it's understandable why they'd be wrong. They're alien and don't know any better. Rick cheers up, saying they just hit the mother lode, and unbuckles his belt and says to get him a bucket of jellies and wants to get rich. Wait, why does he expect them to let him get money from that too when they dedicated their life to getting revenge on him? Well, that sure was merciful. He sure cheered up quick. The pimp near him later on says that while he had his doubts, he was right, and retribution for his planet does pale in comparison to the stacks of money he gets from Rick. So, the story was so merciful that it actually let Rick make it up to the pimps. And the story is self-aware that it's not completely making it up to everyone, because one of them still misses his wife and kid. With that, the story ends. I assume some of the money went to the pimps as well as Rick, since he said let's. So at least he got to make it up to the pimps a little, which I never expected to happen. And I'm so glad he got confronted with what he did to them, and had to deal with the same thing. Even if not nearly as much. But them speaking an alien language at the start was off-putting on that first page. It could have easily not had those first few panels.